All right, yeah. Sorry for anyone watching on the recording. Just starting. Going to be talking about final focus. The first thing I want to make really, really clear is that, as Yukio Sumimoto told me about summary, final focus is an art. It's not a science. And the reason that this is really important is because there's no formula, there's no exact way that final focus should look. Final focus is going to be different every round based on what's going on in the round, based on what you're winning, what you're losing, based on how the round is going. Again, it's an art, not a formula. Getting in the mindset of the fact that final focus is fluid and it's not necessarily going to be the same every time is the first step to giving a good final focus. Because if you're completely reliant on what you've always done or what you see somebody else do every round, if you're reliant on that kind of formula mindset, you're never going to give a good final focus. So getting into the right mindset is the first step. So the first question that we want to ask ourselves is, what should be in your head as you're prepping for final focus? Because before you give the final focus, obviously you have to, figure out what you're going to say in it. So prepping for final focus. Also, if there are any questions, I can't see the little hand thing, or I actually can't see the chat either. So just speak up, or turn your camera on and wave. All right. So prep for final focus should start during summary. And what I mean by prep is just figuring out what you want to say, what you're going to go for, etc. The reason it should start during summary is because every time your first speaker makes an argument, A, you should be flowing it, you should be writing it down. But B, you should be taking a note in your head. Okay, I have this argument to work with. Remember, final focus is going to be pretty much completely built off of your partner's summary. So every argument your summary makes, keep it in mind. And if it is an offensive argument, i.e. a reason why your side of the resolution is true, you should think of it as a new path to the ballot. Maybe every link that your partner extends, every turn that your partner extends is another path to the ballot that you should be, checking away in your mind. What you really want to be doing as you're prepping for final focus is, as the round progresses, you want to be thinking about your win conditions. This is a term that I really like to use. What I think that a win condition is in debate is a single argument that you can essentially stake the round on. Maybe it's the uniqueness question of one of your arguments, i.e. maybe it's what the direction of the status quo looks like. Maybe what the status quo looks like is going to be the make it or break it argument for your case. If you think you're winning that argument, that is going to be your win condition. Every round, there will be a win condition, an argument that if you win, you will win the round. Or at least that is how you should be setting up the round going into final focus. So as you're prepping for final focus, try and think of a win condition, a single argument that you can win that will then make it a lot easier for you to win every other argument. Because again, it's a lot easier to win one argument than to win 5. The next thing you're going to want to be thinking about as you're prepping for final focus is weighing. I'll talk more specifically about what weighing is. And if you know what weighing is, I'll be talking about how you should actually be implicating it in final focus more later. But like I said, for every argument that summary makes, you want to be thinking, okay, if I want to bring this argument up again in final focus, how should I be weighing it and how should I be implicating it? A really, really good way to kind of think about what arguments you want to bring into final focus as you're preparing for it is to kind of write a mental RFD. This doesn't have to be detailed, but final focus should be writing the judge's ballot for them. It's the last speech in the round. So if, as you're preparing for final focus, you're thinking about, okay, if I make this argument, how do I want that argument to show up on my judge's RFD? Will that argument show up on my judge's RFD? Could I potentially see a judge making this the argument that they will write down on their reason for decision, their RFD? Will this be the argument that makes or breaks my case? If the answer is yes, then that is an argument you should be bringing into final focus. That should be an argument that you're preparing to defend and win in final. So the first kind of thought as you're preparing your final focus speech, and if I'm moving too fast, yeah, just please let me know. The first thing that you kind of need to figure out is how you want to structure the speech. And again, like I said, there is no one way to structure a final focus speech. It is an art, not a science. Depending on the round, it will change. I will talk about in a minute what contexts you should be doing certain structures of final. But as you're figuring out the structure, there are essentially 3 parts of the round. I also don't know how experienced everyone is, but what most high-level debaters will do is, as they're taking notes, as they're flowing, they will flow on two pieces of paper. One piece of paper will be for your case, one piece of paper will be for the opponent's case. So there are essentially three parts of the round. One is your offense. And by offense, I mean the argument that will be, proving your side true. It can either be your case or it can be a turn on the opponent's case. There will be your offense. There will be the weighing that is done in the round, which functions independently of offense. It is a way to win the round, but it is dependent on your offense. And then there will be their offense. So three parts of the round. Breaking it down into those three parts will make it a lot easier to view the round. Your offense, the weighing, their offense. So basically, the structure of your final focus is going to revolve around which one of those parts you hit first, second, and third, how you organize your final focus based around those parts. So, but before we get into the specific structure, we're going to want to talk about that second part of the round, the weighing. So I don't know if anyone will answer my questions, but can anyone define weighing for me? You can put it in the chat if you don't want to speak up.
Just comparing impacts.
All right, yeah. So that is a way to look at weighing. Yeah. So each side will have an impact or a link for that matter. Each side will have an impact or a link. The two sides need to compare them. That is generally what weighing is. That is what weighing is in rebuttal, and that is what weighing is in summary. And generally, that is how people define weighing for final focus. For me, I actually don't like to think of it as impact comparison going into final focus. The reason for this is that I have seen a lot of PF debaters, when they're thinking about how they want to weigh their arguments, they're incredibly dependent on these like magnitude, probability, time frame, like these buzzwords that we're taught. The reason that I don't want you to think about it as impact comparison in final focus is because that is very restrictive. Basically, for final focus, I want you to think of weighing as the reason that the judge is voting for you. A lot of us are taught as novices to do these voters or voting issues. You don't have to think of it specifically like that, but your weighing arguments should be why your arguments are the most important in the round. So it's basically, again, why the judge is voting for you. So how do you start to conceptualize weighing? How do you start to realize, like in the round, why the judge should be voting for you? A drill that I like to do, I think Nathaniel Yoon taught it to me, is you go on a YouTube video and you flow around. And after each speech, you write an RFD for each side. And then you kind of try to make the arguments to fit that RFD. Or alternatively, you can flow through the entire round and then write an RFD for that round. And then it will help you see, like, okay, this is what became the most important argument in the round. Why was it the most important argument in the round? Again, when you're weighing, don't rely on buzzwords. Weighing is just why the judge is going to be voting for you, why your arguments are the most important. That's all weighing is. So this is the kind of the first order. This is probably the most common order that you'll see in Final Focus. And by order, I mean like the order that you make arguments. So like I said, our offense, weighing, and then their offense. There's a few reasons that this is a really good order. Sorry, I'm just trying to set up. All right, whatever, it's fine. The first is you're probably going to win your offense in weighing. Again, what you do first in the round is going to be what you do first in the speech is what you're going to spend the most time on. So if you start with your own case and weighing, you will spend the most time on your case and weighing. Again, that is probably good because those are offensive arguments. Those are why you are going to be winning the round. So if you start on those, if you spend the most time on those, you're probably going to win them. Additionally, if you talk about your own, I'm just going to start saying your own case because in 99% of circumstances, your offense is going to be your case. If you start on your own case and then do weighing, you will have more cohesion because the judge will have just heard about what your arguments are, and now they're hearing about why your arguments are important. At this point, you will be winning probably the most offense. The cons of this order is basically that 90% of the time, you're going to spend a lot less time on your opponent's case, and you might even end up conceding their case. The thing is, this isn't necessarily a bad thing because if you're winning offense, if you're winning your own case, and you are also winning weighing, it doesn't matter if you concede their case. At that point, when should you actually do this order? When should you go our case, weighing, their case? If you're ahead on weighing, if you're confident that you can win weighing, or you're behind on your own case, you definitely want to utilize this order. That's because A, you will win your own case if you spend the most time on it, most likely. And you can emphasize weighing rather than emphasizing like what's wrong with their case. Now, this is where final focus becomes pretty hard because I keep saying, like, if you're ahead on weighing, if you're behind on your case, if you're winning your case, if you're losing your case, at this point, you have to start recognizing, you have to start becoming able to recognize which parts of the round you're winning and which parts of the round you're losing. And sometimes it's really obvious. Like if your opponent has read like 17 responses to your second contention, but one response to your first contention, then you're probably winning your first contention. But a lot of times it will become a bit more ambiguous. Which of these arguments am I winning? Which of these arguments am I losing? You're going to want to watch a lot of rounds and do a lot of rounds in order to practice, we call it round vision, seeing what you're winning, what you're losing. So when shouldn't you do this order? If you're behind on weighing and meta weighing, it doesn't make a ton of sense to kind of hang your hat on it. If you're behind on meta weighing, and meta weighing is like explaining which weighing mechanism is more important. We'll talk more about that later. If you're behind on either of those issues, you probably don't want to emphasize it. You probably don't want to make it like what you're hanging your hat on. In that situation, you might want to spend more time on disproving their case in final focus. That way, even if they win the weighing, they're not necessarily winning their case, so they don't win the round. Also, this strategy isn't great for lay judges. I will do it in front of lay judges sometimes, kind of depends on the round, but lay judges don't really like it when you concede things. And they especially don't like it when you concede the opponent's case. So with this strategy, because you're kind of prone to conceding their case, even though on the flow it might not matter, it might kind of annoy lay judges. Again, interrupt me if there's any questions. The next kind of structure of a final focus is going to be talking about our case, then their case, and then doing the weighing. This isn't that different. So I'll go through it pretty quickly. When you're picking the structure, you're still going to need to recognize what you're winning, what you're losing, etc. Just there's a few different pros and cons. Some of the pros, it's a lot easier to do the comparative and when you're doing the weighing. And what I mean by that is if you say like, okay, we're winning this part of our case, they're losing this part of our case. Here's why. When you compare those two cases, we're winning. You'll also get better coverage on each case, right? Because you're not going to spend like a minute and a half on your case and weighing, and then 30 seconds on their case. You'll probably spend more like, bad at math, 45 seconds on your case, 45 seconds on their case, then 30 seconds on weighing. The cons are it's easy to get stuck in the line by line. And if anybody doesn't know what the line by line is, that's basically like going down your flow and being like, they say this, we say this, they say this, we say this. And you might not get to weighing. Weighing is the most important issue in the round in general in public forum. Because again, if you win weighing, you basically just need to win your case. You're usually going to win your case in final focus. At that point, you should probably be prioritizing weighing. Now, I don't think I talked about this yet. I probably will later. But you really don't want to get sucked into the line by line in final focus. Because final focus is your last attempt to appeal to the judge. So in final focus, you want to make it the number one priority should be making sure that the judge, A, understands what your argument is, and B, understands why they are voting for you. Which means that if you do this and you just get sucked into like, they say this, but we say this, and then on their case, there's like 7 responses, here's all of them, they don't respond to any of them. The judge is going to lose sight of the bigger picture. The judge is probably going to lose sight of why your arguments actually matter, which is why this is probably my least favorite structure of final focus, although it is somewhat popular. There's a few situations where it's good. It's pretty good if you have a flow judge. Some flow judges, because they understand how debate works, won't really care if they'll kind of keep the big picture on their minds anyway, and you can focus a bit more on the line by line. If the weighing is clean, if you're easily winning weighing, if you only need to spend like 10 seconds, like if you're going up against like a novice and they like completely concede all of your weighing, then you can probably do this because you don't need to prioritize as much time on proving why your arguments are more important. Or if you're going for the same impact. I'll probably talk more about link weighing later on if we have time, but if you have the same impact, for example, if both of your cases impact out to a recession, this structure will be pretty good. There's a few times when this is bad. The first time when it's bad is usually, in general, this is just not the way you want to go because in general, you want to win weighing. That's why you need time on weighing. That's going to be pretty much every round. Again, I don't really recommend this structure. If you're way ahead on either case, you don't want to do this. Like if you're way ahead on their case or you're way ahead on your own case, you're not going to want to prioritize the case debate, so this structure won't be good. Or if it's a messy round, you don't want to make it more messy by doing a ton of case debate. If it's a messy round, you're going to want to slow down and point out the weighing and the big picture issues. Again, this is only really good if A, you're like completely clapping your opponent, or B, it's like a really flow round. Oh, wait, what? Okay, here we go. The last one, this is probably the most popular structure. This is what I see the most. I don't do it that often, but this is what I see the most. Their case, our case, weighing. So you start answering their case, then you move on to your own case, and then you do the weighing. Again, this kind of has the same benefits as the other one. It's a lot easier to do the comparative after you've already answered both cases. You have more time to answer their case, because you're starting on it. And what's really cool about this structure, and I think it's one of the reasons that it's the most popular, even if people don't realize this, you're ending on the most important issue in the round. As I've said before, the most important issue in the round is going to be your case and the weighing. That is where the judge is voting for you. If the judge votes for you, your case and weighing is what's going to be on the RFD, not like some random defense that you read to their case. So when you end the round on the most important issue, that's going to be really good. This order is fantastic for second final focus because you're spending the last minute 15, minute 30 of the round that the judge is listening to on your case. Because you get the last word, that's what's in the judge's mind as the round ends. What are the cons? So basically what kind of happens here is you might overcover their case, and what by overcover, I mean, you might spend way too much time on their case. And you might get caught in the line by line again, kind of the same issues as the last one. This is really good if you're not if you're not like making a ton of responses to their case, or if you're ahead on your own case. This one's also really good if you have a lay judge, because you start with like disproving them, which lay judges love. Again, this one, there's not really a lot of situations where this one's really bad. If you're generally behind in the round, or if you're like behind on your own case, you probably want to start in your own case. I just realized I talked about orders for a while when they're not that important. The reason they're not that important is because it's going to change every round. And at the end of the day, it's going to feel pretty intuitive. You should just be starting on what you really need to win. I talked about win conditions earlier. You should be starting your final focus on whatever your win condition is. If your win condition is your own case, you should be starting there. If your win condition is like a piece of defense on their case, you should be starting there. Start on what you think is most important. All right. Oh, wow. There's the chat. My bad. I'm just seeing the chat, Adrio. Okay,
no
is there?
worries.
Yeah.
Send it out.
Yeah. I will be checking the chat now. I didn't realize I could actually see it. So I was asked, is there a structure of final focus that is generally better for first final? I wouldn't say that any of them are like really good for first final. I would say that because you're not going to have the benefit of being the last thing that the judge hears anyway, it is probably best to start with this one where you start on your own case and then do the weighing, because that way, since you're not getting any like perceptual benefits on what you finish on, you might as well like make sure you're winning your own case and make sure you're winning weighing. Also, the reason that is really good is because if you win those things and then second final goes up and does my strategy where they start with the other team's case, they are then much more likely to spend too much time on the other team's case because there's a lot like more that you're winning there. So yeah, I would say this one's probably best for first final. Again, it depends on the round. All right, cool. Moving on. Yeah, if there's any questions about the order, let me know. I'm going to talk about actually giving the speech now, the important part. Number one tip. If you take anything away from this lecture, all right. If you take anything away from this lecture, this is what I want you to take away. Please go slow in final focus. I do not care who your judge is. Your judge can be Ryan Jang. Your judge could be a policy LD kid. Your judge could like be Eminem and be able to flow 5,000 words per minute. It does not matter. Go slow in Final Focus. I have given a lot of Final Foci this year. I've had a lot of flow judges. My best rounds have been when I have gone slow in Final Focus. And my worst rounds, the rounds that I lost when I should have been winning, i.e., like my bid round at Apple Valley, I went way too fast in Final Focus and then lost, even though my judges were Alec Bolton, Ishan from Gun, and another flow. Go slow. Here's why. In Final Focus, you need the judges to understand what is most important. You need them to understand what your case is, what your arguments actually are, and why you're winning. The judge will understand that and be naturally predisposed to vote for you if they understood every word that you said. And no matter how clear you think your arguments are, they're going to be less clear to the judge who hasn't spent 2 months writing and debating this case. So please, go slow, explain things. Most important part of Final Focus. The best Final Focus, I'll talk about like really good debaters later, but the people who are best at Final Focus, go slow in Final Focus, even when there's a flow. All right, moving on. One thing that everyone will tell you about Final Focus is that it should be a very big picture speech. And I was told this a lot, and I saw this online and stuff, and it really annoyed me because I had no idea what it actually meant. Essentially, what this means is a lot of times, like I said earlier, kids will have a tendency to be stuck on the line by line. They will see every argument and think, okay, I need to answer every single argument in this round. If I win every argument, there's no way my opponents can win the round. When in reality, even if you have a really good flow judge, they're not going to take every single argument into account. They're going to think, okay, this was the most important thing. Sure, this other team won that, like, I don't know, 7 people wouldn't get to have Medicare for all. Whatever. This other argument is probably way more important. That's where I'll be voting, even if the other team conceded something else. So, by recognizing like what the most important issues in the debate will be, you are then able to make it a much bigger picture round. Okay, rather than like the specific internal links of my opponent's case. Here's my argument. Even if they have some more responses, I'm probably still winning it. Here's why. This argument's the most important. Here's much of weighing. And even if you don't want to vote there, their case probably isn't true either. Here's some reasons. Keeping it big picture will allow you to clarify the round, make it really easy for the judge to understand, which again, clarification, most important thing in Final Focus. There are situations where you do want to do some line by line in Final Focus. Those situations are, okay, there are pretty much never situations when you have to really be line by line in Final Focus. If you give a big picture final, you'll be good most of the time. If you are like, if you're against a team that makes a lot of arguments and none of them are very good, you will be tempted to get sucked into the line by line. Don't let that happen. The arguments aren't very good. Probably get rid of a lot of them with one argument. You may want to do line by line if there are not a lot of arguments on the flow. If there's only like 4 total arguments, it is fine to be like, they say this, here's our response. They say this, here's our response. Because it won't be too confusing for the judge. It's not super important though. This is one tip that I got. Well, there's kind of 2 tips here that I got from Nathaniel, again, who helped me a lot with Final Focus. A, you want to focus on what you're winning and deal with what you're losing. Basically, I'll talk more about like perceptual dominance and like presentation of Final Focus later on. But if you make the things that you are winning seem really, really important, the judge will probably think that they're important too. It's just how we are. If somebody comes into my room and like tells me like, hey, come downstairs. I don't know. Maybe I'll finish the like game of League I'm playing. Maybe I'll like finish the YouTube video. But if somebody comes into my room and is like, Sean, come downstairs right now, I will get up and I will go. So I'm not saying like scream at your judge. I'm saying if you want your judge to pay attention to something, make it seem really important. This is a try or die issue. This is the largest impact in the round. This is the most important argument in the round. You'll hear that a lot. That's kind of what you want to be doing. And then when there's issues that you're losing, you don't want to ignore them. Don't pretend they're not there, but as you're responding to them, make them seem less important. The most important argument in this round is our second contention on like South Korea. Is the most important for these reasons. Okay, sure. They have this response. Even if it's true, it doesn't really matter. Case outweighs, whatever. Even if you like conceded defense coming out of second rebuttal, if you make it seem not very important, judge might even think it's not very important. So now another tip that Nathaniel gave me is basically when you are giving final focus, you want to sound like you're winning. Basically, a lot of people will come into final focus, and this is especially true in rounds that you're losing, sounding like kind of frantic, like, we are definitely winning our first contention. It's super important. They have like 7 responses. Here's our responses. I'm definitely winning all of them. If you sound kind of cool and in control, if you sound like you are winning, the judge, before they even look at their flow, will probably think that you are winning. So stay calm as you're giving the speech, even if you're getting clapped. The final tip is one that my LD coach gives me. Their name is Abby Spencer, fantastic debater. They tell me all the time, debate up. What this means. PF debaters have a tendency to be like, when they're talking about their opponent's arguments, oh, this is a dumb argument. Oh, this is silly. You want to respond to arguments as if they are the best version of that argument. Don't say that something has no warrant if it has a warrant, because the judge will notice that kind of thing. So in final focus, especially in first final focus, you want to think, okay, how are they going to make this argument sound in second final focus? I want to respond to that. All right. That's not a huge issue. In final focus, you kind of need to walk the line between making yourself sound really good, but also not just like making fun of your opponent, because the judge will notice that. So now I want to talk about extensions. Does anybody know what it means to extend something? Again, you can put in the chat or you can speak up.
It's kind of like bringing up arguments that you know you're going to win on or that are important to be considered.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, basically, an extension is basically the re-explanation of your argument in summary and final focus. So if I have a contention about economic growth, I can't just be like, in final focus, I can't just be like, Medicare for all causes economic growth. I have to be like, Medicare for all would cut out health spending, which would allow people to spend more, which would boost economic growth. That needs to be done in summary and final focus. But the thing about final focus is, shocker, it's 2 minutes long. Whose idea that was, I don't know. But it is 2 minutes long, which means that the last thing that you want to do is to spend like 25, 30 seconds explaining your case. Again, explanation is super important. You don't want to spend the whole speech on it. So a tip that I was given for re-explaining arguments in final focus is the 1-sentence strategy. My PF coach, Mac Hayes, told me about this. What he said is, when you're doing your extension, when you're extending your argument, try and do it all in 1 sentence. If you do it in a bunch of sentences, you're going to try and make like 4 complete thoughts. Try and make it 1 complete thought. That will make it very, very efficient. So another thing, I kind of have this out of order here. You want to extend every argument in the context of the round. Everything in your final focus should be in the context of the round. What do I mean by this? So, like, let's say your argument is about like war and theirs is about economic growth. You can like integrate arguments as you're re-explaining it as to why it's really important. I.e., our argument is that no first use would cause war by like, I don't know, removing deterrence against Russia in the Baltics. Like, oh, hang on, sorry, I just blanked. Then, as you're extending it, war is the most important argument because, war is more important than econ because, like, you know, lives are irreversible. Now, onto the other weighing that we have done scope, probability, etc. Another thing that you can do is every argument will have multiple parts, i.e., actually, yeah. Does anybody want to tell me the 3 to 4 parts of every argument?
Uniqueness, link, internal link, and impact.
All right, thank you, Rowan. Yes, every argument has uniqueness, link, internal link, and impact. There's probably guides to this online. I'll go over it really quickly. Uniqueness is what the status quo looks like. Link is what changes after the resolution passes. Internal link is other stuff that happens, and the impact is, the impact of the argument. So you are not always going to need every part of those arguments. You're not always going to need every part of those arguments. Maybe both teams agree on the uniqueness question. Maybe both teams agree that, like, I don't know, the state of the American healthcare system is really bad. If both teams agree on that, you probably don't need to spend time in your final focus re-explaining it. So now let's talk about extending weighing. So usually there will be a lot of weighing in your summary. So as you going into final focus, you want to take the weighing that was in summary, and I hope there was weighing in summary. If your partner isn't weighing in summary, you might want a new partner. But as you're bringing that weighing into final focus, you want to expand on it. You don't want to just repeat it, because nobody likes a final focus that just repeats everything from summary and doesn't do anything new. And if you do that, your final was bad. So what are some things that we can do to make the weighing from summary better as we extend it into final focus? One of the big things that we can do is meta weighing. This is very, very rare in final focus, in PF rather. My good friend Esme talks about it a lot. She judges a lot of rounds, and she says every round, one team says scope, and then the other team says probability, and then I say, what do I do with this? So in final focus, what you can do is both teams will have made weighing arguments for why their arguments are more important. Alicia, this is the answer to your question. Each team will make arguments for why their impacts are more important, i.e. scope. My impact affects more people. Well, in final focus, let's say you have made scope arguments and the other team has made probability arguments. Now, in final focus, you can make arguments for why we should prioritize one of those two things, i.e. we're winning scope. You should prioritize scope because this is the most objective way to evaluate an impact. Probability relies on your personal opinion of what is more probable. Scope only relies on the hard numbers. Or prioritize probability. If we don't do action because there's some small chance that like a huge impact will happen, we'll never do anything because every action that we could take has a small chance of causing something really bad. So prioritizing scope creates policy paralysis. So we should probably focus on probability. There was incredible policy paralysis weighing in quarters of presentation, BCC versus Leland. So yeah, that is what meta weighing is versus regular weighing. I strongly suggest you do meta weighing in final focus. The reason it is very important is, again, each team is going to do weighing, and then the judge is going to say, what happens now? And then what the judge is going to do is they are going to intervene on what they think is more important. And then you will get lay screwed, and then you will be sad. If you want the judge to prioritize something, tell them to prioritize it. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have on extensions. Moving on. Any questions? Speak up, put them in the chat. All right. This is the most important part of final. This is my favorite part of final. Turning arguments into voters. So usually in summary, you're going to have a bunch of arguments. In final focus, you're turning them into voting issues. You're turning them into reasons that the judge is going to vote for you on them. So how do you want to do this? First, weighing. Don't just do weighing. Say, you are voting for us because our impact has the largest scope, which is the most important because of X. Implicating voting issues is how you win the round. If you tell the judge, listen, in fun, listen, we have won this argument. You're voting for us on it because we have won weighing and we have won meta weighing. The judge will now think, okay, well, I had these two teams. This one told me that they won their argument, and they told me that they won weighing, and they told me they won this thing called meta weighing. I should probably vote for them because they told me to. So as you are trying to turn arguments into voting issues, as you are trying to get the judge to vote for your argument, remember the ballot trick that I talked about earlier. As you are preparing for your final focus, as you're giving your final focus, think, what do I want this argument to look like on my judge's RFD? And then explain it like you want it to look on your judge's RFD. So you're also going to want to extend with ballot speak. I'll talk more about ballot directive language on the next slide. But basically, as you're extending arguments in final focus, you want to start them with things like, you're voting for us because of our second contention. Our second contention is the most important argument in the round. You should not be voting for them here because they have conceded this. You also want to implicate your arguments to the round. Arguments don't exist in a vacuum. You want to do a lot of comparative analysis in final focus. We have our second contention here. It is way more important than their first contention because it's a lot bigger on scope. I don't know why I keep using the example of scope. It's the only way I can think of. This is why I don't give summary. Yeah. Basically, if you turn your argument into a voter in final focus, you're going to win the round because nobody does this for some reason. I don't really know why. Let's move on. So now we're going to talk about like presentation, the presentation of your final focus, what it should sound like. This is not just for lay judges. This is something I hear all the time. Like people in flow rounds will just sound like they don't care and like just sound like monotone and stuff because they think that the flow judge is only going to evaluate the flow. If your speech sounds really good, the judge is going to be predisposed to vote for you. Even in like I do Lincoln Douglas as well. Even in LD, where people are going like 400 words per minute, you will still have people vote for you because your speech sounded better. And the judge was like, I don't know, it sounded like this was really important. Especially in confusing rounds and especially in close rounds, if your speech sounded a lot better, the judge is going to be automatically predisposed to vote for you. They will go into evaluating their flow with you winning in their minds. Trust me, I've judged a lot of rounds too. That's just how it is. We're humans. So you want to emphasize the points where you're winning. Really make them important. I can't emphasize this enough. Then you want ballot directive language. Every sentence in your final focus should be made with the goal of getting the judge to vote on that argument. Again, think about how you want arguments to look on the RFD. My best final focuses, my partner Esme has turned to me after and been like, damn, the ballot directive language is on point that final. It's going to be really important. Implicate everything as a voter, make everything sound like a voter. Again, seriously, please slow down. The kids I coach, one of them is actually here. They didn't really go very slow in final focus and summary before. And I told them, go slower. And now they go slower. And now they win a lot of rounds. Very proud. Another thing that my coach taught me, Mac, love him. He taught me about one-liners. And I've been watching a lot more rounds and I've seen a lot of the best teams will do this. There was just a round post on Reddit like a few hours ago. Oakden YZ versus Hackley YK, and Nathaniel gives one in rebuttal. A one-liner is basically just what it sounds like, a one-sentence description of why you're winning. We've won the weighing, so we've won the round. I think the one that Nathaniel used was a UBI is an unchanging solution to a constantly changing problem. The reason one-liners are really good, even for the flow, is because they basically synthesize the entirety of this 45-minute round with like 40 arguments in it into one sentence and one reason why the judge is voting for you. So I suggest that you begin and end, or at least end your speech with a one-line description of why the judge is voting for you. The first sentence of what the first sentence of the RFD should be. The last thing I want to emphasize is I've used a lot of jargon in this lecture. We as debaters, we use jargon to talk about debate because it makes it easier to talk about debate. There's a lot of terms, a lot of stuff like that. Even if you have a flow panel, don't use jargon. There's a Bill Batterman lecture. He's a famous policy lecturer. In policy, the most technical debate style, they are still telling kids in your 2AR, in your last speech, don't use debate jargon, because if you use regular human talk in your final focus to explain why your arguments are important, the judge is going to understand them a lot better. If they understand them a lot better, they'll be predisposed to vote for you. So don't use jargon, please. All right. I'm going to spend some time on more advanced strategy. I put in the Reddit post, I will talk about advanced things. And then I sat down and I was like, I don't know what is considered advanced. So I want to talk about final focus collapse. Can anybody tell me what it means to collapse in debate? All right, I will explain it. Collapsing is basically when the round just comes down to one argument. Oh, I think somebody put it in the chat. Yes, dropping a point to focus on others. Specifically, dropping all your other points to focus on one, or maybe two. Thank you, Sam. Usually, the collapse will happen in either rebuttal, second rebuttal, or the summary speeches. But in final focus, you should be collapsing even further. Let's say summary extended a contention, a piece of defense on their case, and a turn on their case. In final focus, you only want one piece of offense. Either kick the case and go for the turn, or kick the turn and go for the case. Like I said, the entire point of final focus is to make it very, very clear to the judge why they're voting for you. If there are multiple pieces of offense on the table, you now have to spend more time winning those pieces of offense, weighing each of them, and explaining why the judge should vote for each of them. It makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, with a 2-minute speech. Just focus on one, win one. Now, with specific arguments, let's say does anybody know what a DA or a dissat is? You can speak up or put it in the chat. I'll give you a minute.
It's kind of like an independent argument in like rebuttal.
Yeah. So it's like an independent new argument in rebuttal. For who messaged me in the chat, it's not a defensive argument. It's actually specifically an offensive argument. Think of it as a new contention in rebuttal. So, this actually happened to me at Jack House semis. I read a DA, I read a dissad about small pharma. I read it in rebuttal, and then in final focus, I didn't really think we were going to win on that dissad. We hadn't really weighed it, but the link in the dissad, i.e. my argument, I had made an argument that Medicare for All would make investors flee from small pharmas. That argument was conceded. The other team had read a bunch of responses to the uniqueness. They had read a bunch of responses to the impact, but they hadn't read any responses to the link. And I didn't do this in the round, and I was really upset about it. What I could have done is I could have said, okay, we're not winning the dissad, but what we are winning is the link. We are winning that Medicare for All caused people to flee small pharma. Even if we don't win an impact off of this, it proves their case wrong, because their case says that Medicare for All would create innovation. That won't happen if there's no pharma. So what you should be doing going into final focus is you should be breaking down every argument and thinking, okay, which parts of this individual argument am I winning, and which parts of this individual argument could I be utilizing? Another example of this, I was watching a round at Blue Key. It was Lynbrook RG versus Whitman PD. Whitman was reading a case about undocumented immigrants getting healthcare under Medicare for All. Lynbrook read a turn that basically said, okay, but Medicare for All would put everyone's information in a database and makes it really easy for undocumented immigrants to get deported. And that would cause undocumented immigrants to stop going to the hospital because they're afraid of getting deported. Whitman made a bunch of arguments for why Whitman makes a bunch of arguments for why nobody would get deported. Well, Lynbrook says, okay, fine, nobody gets deported, but you've conceded that this means that undocumented immigrants won't go to the doctor. So you don't have a case anymore. We're not winning the turn, but we are utilizing the impact or the other impact as defense to your case. And then they just ended up winning on their own case. And they won that round, and it was a bubble round. What do I mean by flowing DAs? Oh yeah, That is why when you are flowing arguments, you should be very careful to separate out each individual part of the argument, because you might not need the whole argument. You might need just one part of it. The next part I want to talk about is going for turns. So a lot of times in summary, oh, I never actually defined this. Can anybody define a turn for me?
Like when you gain offense on their case, either
Yeah,
their
yeah.
impact is like a bad thing or like a link turn.
Yes. Okay, exactly. And Alicia, you were right in the chat. It's basically saying the opposite of their case is true. It's getting the offense off of their case. A lot of times in summary, your partner will both extend a turn to their case and your own case. Well, a lot of times in Final Focus, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes in Final Focus, you will realize, my case is gone. I'm not winning my case. So I will go for a turn. What does this mean? And when is this a good thing? So basically what this means is your case is now out of the picture. We're not talking about our own case anymore. We are going to go completely for this turn. The reason that we can do this is because turns are offensive. When should you be doing this? Okay. If the turn is weighed, turns need to be weighed. Think of turns just like your case. If your partner weighed this turn in summary, it is probably fine to collapse to it. If they have not, it would be a bit weird to do new weighing for a turn in Final Focus. So when is this actually strategically viable? It's really good if their Final Focus overcovers your case. If they start on your case and spend like a minute on it, like, okay, I have to spend like a minute answering all their stuff, then 30 seconds extending it, and then do I even get to weigh it? Like, at that point, it might be better to go for a turn. The reason turns are really good is because you basically get rid of all of the weighing that they have done, because you're now usually getting access to their impact. I.e., if they have read an AF case on Medicare for All about how innovation in pharma would go up, and then you make a turn about how it would actually like go down because of, I don't know, investor flight, you now have two different links into the same impact coming from each side. So you basically co-opt all of their reasons for why their impact is really important. And now you can just do link weighing. Reasons why your link into that impact is better. So yeah, go for turns if you're behind on weighing or if you're losing your case. It is okay to collapse down to a turn in Final Focus. The last thing I want to talk about is crystallization. Hang on, something in the chat. Is new link weighing in Final Focus abusive? Second final, yes. First final, maybe. Probably. I mean, it depends on the weighing, I guess. If you're like, you should prefer ours because like we have like actual empirical trends. That's probably fine for first final focus. There shouldn't be anything new in second final just because they can't actually answer it. But I mean, there's some judges that think impact calc in first final is fine. So depends on your judge. If it's a lay judge, it's fine. Most flow judges, it's fine. There's some judges that won't like it. Check with your judge, honestly. Next thing I want to talk about is crystallization. I don't know why I put this under advanced because we've kind of already talked about it. What crystallization is this is something I learned in middle school parliamentary debate. It's basically just crystallizing the round down to one issue and making that issue really, really clear. I have put this in like 7 spots in the presentation because I want to make it very, very clear. I want to crystallize this presentation down to the fact that Final Focus needs to pick an issue and prove that it is important. Final Focus should crystallize the round. It is your last shot to prove why you're winning to the judge. That should be the number one thing that you prioritize. This stuff like utilizing uniqueness and conceded links and disads on their case, not as important as just making the round seem simple to the judge. All right, last thing I'm going to talk about, what time is it? Yes, last thing I will talk about, I think, oh no, second to last thing I'll talk about. Something in the chat. Should we always collapse in Final Focus? Yes, you should always be collapsing. In the round in general, you should always be collapsing. The reason for this is because in summary and final focus, you're not going to have enough time to win every single argument. You should always, always pick an issue and stick to it. Usually this should be happening in summary. 99% of the time it should be happening in summary. I'm just saying that in final focus, you can go a bit farther. All right. Moving on to mirroring summary now. So final focus really shouldn't have much new in it. The things in final focus should have been in summary. And you really want the explanations of arguments to be similar to what they were in summary. A few reasons for this. The first is you want to keep up a narrative. You want to have a clean story of what your arguments actually say. You also don't want to lose the flow. You don't accidentally want to make a new argument that the judge will want to evaluate. And third, this one is one that I didn't think about it for a while. If you're going up there in final focus and just making a bunch of new arguments, you're going to make your partner feel like, oh, they don't like my arguments. And that's going to mess with your chemistry. Team chemistry is very important. So trust your summary and mirror it. How do you do this? Like I said earlier, you should be prepping your final focus during summary. Summary is when you should start knowing what you're going to do. So your summary is really what's going to determine your strategy. Final focus can do a bit more. Maybe final focus decides to go for the turn rather than case, but it should really be based on summary. Don't change anything that summary said, just add on to it. I said earlier, like add meta weighing onto your weighing, add like a better explanation onto their explanation. Don't change what they did. Most important thing, don't change the narrative of the round. Yeah, this probably doesn't need to be defined. I mean, a narrative is just kind of like the story of what your arguments actually say. Don't change it. Make sure it is cohesive throughout the round so the judge actually understands. Be very attractive to a judge. I think this is... Oh, I have two more things to talk about. Sorry, I forgot. I underestimated the length of this presentation. Really quickly, final focus needs to be very efficient. What efficiency means is not wasting time on stuff that you don't need. So, A, don't make too many arguments. I already talked about that. 2, cut out unnecessary words. PF debaters will be like, our first contention on economic growth is like, the implication of this is, I don't even know. Basically, PFers say a lot of words that you don't need to. Things like secondarily, primarily, insofar as. Just make the argument. You don't need filler words. B, people's extensions, the explanation of their arguments will be really, really long for no reason. Like I said before, try and do your entire extension of your case in one sentence. Make it a lot shorter. And if you have decided to ignore what I've begged you to do and go fast in final focus anyway, it's not an excuse to be lazy. Talking really fast doesn't mean that you can still use a ton of filler words. If you're going fast, you should still be just as efficient because then you can, make more arguments. Checking the chat. All right. All right. This should be the last thing. Oh, chat. What are drills that we can do to help with efficiency? I'm going to talk about this in the drill section. I'll get to that. How do you get better at final focus? Because this is what I was really concerned about. I learned all these things about what final focus should look like, and then I didn't know how to get better. Number one thing, redos. After you give a speech, after the round, give it again, and give it again, and give it again. Record yourself giving it again, and then give it again a few more times. If I don't like a final focus, I'll redo it 9 to 10 times. If I do like it, I'll only redo it 3 times. That way, every issue with that speech will be gone. You will have a perfect final focus. That way, you know what to do for the next time. The next thing that you might want to do is watch great debaters. I put up a list of a few really, really good debaters from the last couple of years who give great final foci. Hattie Bilson from Westridge BM, fantastic debater. Ryan Jang from Corona del Sol PJ, or FJ, I think, at the end. Serena Mao from Mission San Jose MC. Francesca Lupi from Campbell Hall DL, and Nathaniel Yule from Oakton YZ. These are all S-tier debaters. I personally worked with Nathaniel and Ryan. Just incredible final foci. Watch them, emulate them, learn from them. They're all on YouTube. Next thing you want to do is a few drills that will help you a lot. The first one is just watch a round on PF Videos. If you don't know, PF Videos is a YouTube channel that has a ton of round recordings of PF. Watch a video, give each final focus. You can even give first final focus and then give second final focus to your own final focus. That That way, you will learn how to do final focus without it being your own case. So you have to explain a lot of arguments that you may not have been able to do before. The next thing that what helps me a lot, I've done this a few times, is watch a VF video or a recording of your own round and give summary, but do it in 2 minutes. The reason this is really good is because summary has to deal with a lot more arguments than final focus. So if you practice giving a summary and dealing with all those arguments in the time frame of final focus, you will get a lot more efficient with dealing with things. Then the next thing you want to do is compression drills. Do a final focus radio and then do it in a minute 45, a minute 40, 130, 120. That way, and don't cut out any arguments. Make all the same arguments, just do it in a shorter period of time. That way you get a lot more efficient. And finally, it's just going to be experience. The only real way to get a lot better at debate is to debate a lot. Do a lot of practice rounds, do as many tournaments as you can. The more rounds that you do, the better you will get at final focus. I think I did, if I had to count, it would probably be like 70 rounds over the summer. And I think I got a good bit better at final focus. So do rounds, you will get better. And finally, if you feel like you're plateauing, you're not. You're just not. Even if you don't notice the fact that you are getting better, I promise you are getting better. Every speech that you give will make you better. You will get better at debate. Don't get disheartened. All right. If you have any questions, speak up now, put them in the chat. I can hang around for a few more minutes. If you don't want to ask me a question right now, you can contact me. I'm on Facebook, Sean Wallace, SeanWallace. My email is on the screen. I'm going to upload the recording of this to YouTube, and I will put the link to the slides in the description. I will also stop sharing. I will put the link to the slides in the chat right now. So I will do that. In the meantime, are there any questions?
I have one question. So, what do you do in final focus if you find yourself in a scenario where say your summary did not cover something that it should have? Like, say, I don't know, but like, are there scenarios when it's ever like acceptable to bring up new stuff in final focus?
Yeah. So number one thing is try not to bring up new stuff. What I have found is that if my partner forgets to cover something, and by the way, don't get mad at your partner if they forget to do something. It happens. We're human. Having a friendship with your partner and like having a good partner relationship is going to be way more important than yelling at them over dropping something. But if they do, the number one thing that I try to do is I try to find things that I am winning to leverage against their arguments. It's not okay to make new arguments. It is okay to implicate the current arguments differently. I.e., this actually happened to us in a round. And it was actually me dropping something and then my partner fixing it. I accidentally dropped a piece of defense. I conceded that South Korea does not have the personnel to proliferate. Well, in summary, it was going to be second summary, so my partner couldn't really make new arguments. My partner goes, okay, fine. They've won that argument. It's fine. It's conceded. It doesn't matter because we're winning our case. We're winning the rest of our case, proving that South Korea wants to proliferate. Okay, if that's true, they can just hire new people. Their argument can be true, still doesn't matter. So try to leverage the things that you are winning against the things that you aren't. Could you really quickly go over one-liners again? Yeah, one-liners are pretty simple. It's a one-sentence explanation as to why you're winning. So if you go and read your RFDs on Tabroom, a lot of times they will say something like, I voted AF because they won their first contention and they won the scope weighing. So your one-liner can be something like, we're winning our case, we're winning the weighing, we're winning the round. I do that one a lot. In more lay rounds, you can make kind of like artsy, kind of annoying ones. For example, the example I gave earlier, Nathaniel, a UBI, universal basic income, is a unchanging solution to a constantly changing problem. Basically, one-line description of why you're winning the round. Are there any other questions?
I just had two. The first would be, how would you generally
I'm sorry, Sam. My audio just completely cut out. Can you say that again?
Yeah. So which aspect or which part of your final focus should take the most time, typically in your opinion?
Yeah. Again, as I said earlier, that's going to depend on the round. In general, it should be, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be weighing or it's going to be winning your case or the turn that you're going for. Because those are the two things that are going to be on the judge's ballot if they vote for you. So those are the things you want to spend the most time on. If you're winning weighing, but you're not really winning your case, you want to spend the most time on your case. If you're winning your case, but you're not really winning weighing, you want to spend the most time on weighing. What was your other question?
Yeah, and then my other question was, in terms of collapsing, would you generally believe it's smarter to collapse to the point where there has been the most focus and interaction through the round, or to a contention that has been less interacted with but less strongly extended?
I think that your collapse should depend on the weighing. I think that the argument that you should go for should be primarily based on what you think can be weighed the best. So even if there's like a bunch of responses to one contention, but you think that you're winning the weighing really well, you should hang your hat on winning that contention because more often than not, you'll win it. B, I think that, like, for example, if there's a turn on the board, but your partner like extended it horribly, like they only extended like the link and they didn't extend an impact and they didn't weigh it, even if that argument is really good and even if it's really clean, it's probably not worth your time to risk going for it and risk a bunch of new arguments and risking the judge not evaluating it. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, I just got a judge in the chat. Bye, Anya. Going slow is key, but could you maybe read it? Wait, hang on. Oh, yeah. So this person is basically asking like how fast is too fast? It really depends on what you sound like. Like your speed depends on how clear you are. A lot of times by the end of the round, my throat starts to hurt and I don't speak very clearly. So I go very slow. People have actually said that I go too slow. So it's personal preference. For example, my final foci will sound like this. I will talk at this speed to prove to the judge that I am winning the most important argument in the round. You can go a little bit faster than that. I'm really just saying, don't start final focus going this fast because their judge is not going to understand you. They're going to get really overwhelmed. They're probably not going to flow every argument that you make. Yeah. Another question in the chat. Can you briefly explain what exactly are turns? Okay, yeah. Okay, so a turn is an argument that is made in rebuttal. Generally, turns say that the opposite of their argument is true. If their argument is that Medicare for all increases pharmaceutical innovation, you could read a turn that says that Medicare for all would decrease pharmaceutical innovation. Turns are good because turns are reasons to vote for you. They are offensive arguments. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Okay. All right. I think we're good. Thank you everyone for coming. Yes. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Love you all for coming. Message me on Facebook, email, whatever. If you have any questions, I'm open to helping. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Hey, Moon.